3, 2, 1.
Yippee-Ki-Yay, mother.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Welcome to another edition of Yippee-Ki-Yay Mother Podcast. Woo-hoo. What's going on, Mother Podcasters?
Hey,
Hello.
Ralph, how's it going?
It's going fine.
Hi, Ralphie.
Fine.
How you feeling after your first week back?
I feel okay.
I mean, the audience was really appreciative that you're back. Did you see all those comments?
All the editing I had to do on the last two shows was, calling me nerdy. That one, nerdy Ralph.
But it was.
Welcome
Wait a
back,
minute.
Nerdy
That's
Ralph.
unfair.
Nobody
It was.
believes that, buddy.
It
Don't
was. It was with affection.
Yeah, I guess nerds. Well, I guess maybe.
And you're the one that hates nerds.
I don't hate nerds.
Yes, you do.
Well, a little bit.
You made that very clear.
A little bit. All right,
All you
so
nerds out there.
This is back to our courtroom drama. Themed shows. John spun the wheel to John's name, and John got to pick the film for this week, and it is what?
Ghosts of World War II.
1954 is the Caine Mutiny.
Okay, we'll do a little Caine Mutiny. Then we'll spin for next week's. There's 3 of us left on the wheel, and then we'll do a little round of what did you watch?
Yeah, excellent. And while you're at it, why not subscribe, hit the notification button, and smash that like button.
Only if you like it. Well, no. Even if you don't like it. Even if you
don't
hate
like it, still smash it.
All right. Let's talk about the Caine Mutiny.
Okay, so I picked the Caine Mutiny. I originally had picked another movie that I love, a courtroom drama. And but then I started thinking about this movie, and I know I say this a lot, but there are certain movies that when they come on, I will watch them. And in the Caine Mutiny, if it comes on, especially during the courtroom scene, I will always watch the rest of the scene. And there's a lot of reasons why, but let me give you a little background. It's directed by Edward Dmytryk, who was part of the Hollywood 10. It was produced by Stanley Kramer and was based on the book by Herman Wouk. The movie was also based on the play, The Court Martial of the Caine Mutiny Court Martial. And in the play...
It's
Herman Wouk. Herman Wouk. Okay, sorry, Herman Wouk.
I didn't know this was a woke film.
It is. It is woke. The play is actually the trial, where they describe a lot of what they actually show in the film. So there are things about the film I love, including Humphry Bogart as Captain Queeg, who is actually much older than the actual character is, but he was fantastic in this film. I liked seeing the typhoon. I liked seeing the things that they talked about. They actually showed you Old Yellowstone, why he got that nickname. Now, there's a subplot with romance that wasn't necessary. It didn't add anything to this.
Was it in the book?
No, it was not in the book. It was not in the book. And the actor, I want to get his name right.
Robert Francis.
Robert Francis.
Akshay Kumar.
They were building him, and he ended up dying about 10 months later in a plane crash. He was only 25 years old.
Four movies.
The cast is phenomenal. Humphrey Bogart, Van Johnson, Jose Ferrer, Fred McMurray, Robert Francis, who died. Tom Tully, who played the original captain, was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in his very small role. E.G. Marshall, Mae Wynn was the female lead. Lee Marvin, Claude Akins, and James Best, or Roscoe P. Coltrane, as we all know him as. Fantastic cast. They did change Queeg in the book. He was crazy. The Navy would not have supported this film if they made him crazy, so they gave him PTSD. I think that's what it is, right? PTSD. So it was more. He had a sickness. He wasn't crazy, although crazy is sick, but it wasn't this. It was almost like justified, because the Navy originally did not want anything to do with this because they didn't want mutiny. So they weren't going to cooperate, but they ended up cooperating, although they wanted a bunch of changes made that Dmytryk didn't make any of the changes anyway. Ferrer, I thought the whole cast was good. Van Johnson, especially. Jose Ferrer, I thought was great as the lawyer. But it's Humphrey Bogart's performance in this movie. And there's a lot of people out there who, they think of Humphrey Bogart, Rick Blaine, Sam Spade. You think of them like that. Other than the African Queen, I don't think he gets enough props for his acting. And his performance in this was so good that you see the gradual buildup to what ends up happening. in the courtroom scene where he starts swinging his ball bearings and starts going crazy. It's just a tour de force performance. I don't, I should know this, but I don't. Yeah, he was nominated for an Oscar for this. He was nominated for an Oscar, and I think deservedly so. It was the second highest grossing film, only behind White Christmas, starring Jose Ferrer's wife, Rosemary Clooney. Little tidbit there. And the last thing is in the movie, Jose Ferrer confronts all the military guys after he's won. And it's a tough scene, but it's not nearly as tough as the actual book and the play, where he really talks about the Nazis and how the line is Goering could wipe his ass with my mother because they made the Jews into soap. And this was lines in that film. So it was much more impactful and much more guilty about doing that to Queeg, because Queeg and his generation saved us from the Nazis. And if you saw the version with Eric Bogdosian and Brad Davis, a TV version, Jeff Daniels was in it too. They really did it much more like the play and the book. They couldn't do that in 1954, obviously.
They're doing a new one now, right?
They are. I heard that with
William Friedkin's last one.
Yeah,
that's William Friedkin's last film.
Kiefer Sutherland.
The Caine court martial. It's titled.
Yeah, that's the name of the play. But I think as far as and it's the last, it's almost 35 minutes. The courtroom scene is about 35 minutes, and it's intense. Everybody's really E.G. Marshall's really good in it. But when you first mentioned Courtroom Dramas, this was the second movie I picked. But this to me is a courtroom drama. No offense, Chris, but Ghost of Mississippi, it didn't resonate with me like a courtroom drama, where this really does. So I love this film. I love the performances. And by the way, in the play, it was Henry Fonda who played the lawyer, and I think it was Lloyd Nolan was Commander Queeg, if I remember right. Anyway, that's the synopsis. I would love to hear what you guys
was your first movie that you thought of, was it Liar Liar?
No, but you know what? That's a good court. It was And Justice for All, actually. With Al Pacino.
That's a good one. That's a good Baltimore movie.
I love that movie. But
that will be coming. So.
Okay, so yeah, good. I'm glad somebody picked it because I love that movie.
Right.
But this was I really love this movie. Rosie always says, every time, why do you watch this over and over again? Sometimes you watch a performance and you just want to see it over and over and I really appreciate what he did.
I'm with Rosie. I would like to.
Has everyone seen it? Before you watch it for this, had anyone not seen it?
I've seen bits and pieces. 20 times.
You've seen it 20 times, Ralph. You saw bits.
All I knew is the marble.
The ball bearings.
That's it, the ball bearings. I don't. If I've seen it, I've seen bits and pieces.
You've never seen it, Chris?
Nope. This is the first. I watched it a couple nights ago.
Drew,
all in one sitting, which was great.
Drew?
Yeah, I watched it actually in a high school class.
Oh.
And I read the book.
You did read the book
as well. Mm-hmm. I like Herman Wouk a lot. I liked Winds of War and War and Remembrance, and those are actually, I'm very curious to go back and see those miniseries. I'll bet they hold up pretty well, actually. But I knew I had seen the movie. I remembered the ball bearings and just Bogart's affect, but I hadn't remember much else from it. I thought the Jose Ferrer just crackles the whole movie when he finally shows up. It's just great. I love watching him.
Yeah, I think he's the best.
I saw something.
Agreed.
I have something in my basement that probably no one has seen. I have a 16 millimeter. It's like a 2-reeler designed for schools, starring Orson Welles. It's something like called Individualism versus Authority, and it's a cut down on the Caine Mutiny, with Orson Welles talking about authority in it. Referring to the movie. Then they show a clip from the movie and cut back to Orson Welles.
He wasn't playing like Queeg. He was.
No, he was just standing in a studio.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
I got it for like $5 somewhere, and I watched it once or twice. But it's an odd little piece.
Yeah, this is an interesting. First of all, if they could have just thrown away all the part with the couple that was in love.
Yeah.
Well, that was really compelling because his mother might not have liked the girl.
Well, that was the whole thing with the mother, and but it's like I like the stuff at Yosemite where they were with the fire thing that they did. I guess that's something that actually they did.
Well, that would have been really dangerous for him because being made of wood like he is, he could have easily
he was a
caught
little
the spot.
stiff, but it's the tone of the film that you're talking about. Bogart's performance, and that's what that stands out for you. I agree with Drew. I thought Jose Ferrer was fantastic, and he's the only one to me that came off as authentic. Like I felt like he was. And Fred McMurray, I guess, was supposed to be playing the.
What a sleazebag.
Well, I mean, he was supposed to be the intellect in the room, and it turns out he was the coward. But the way the film, what surprised me, because I hadn't seen the film, is the turn at the end that the lawyer Jose Ferrer, the speech you're talking about, which kind of cut into what the whole. I mean, I guess we as a viewer are supposed to go, this guy is nuts. Although it did seem like they were making him a little crazy, especially those scenes where he's saying everybody has to wear a helmet and they're throwing helmets around, and he looks down and he sees the guy's not wearing a helmet. He turns away and he comes back and they're wearing helmets on the deck, and the guy's going, yeah, he's been wearing a helmet the whole time. So it did feel like they were pushing him a little bit in that direction.
Well, he brought that out. He brought that out at the end. He says, be honest. He asked for your help, and you guys all turned him down, right? And Steve Merrick, played by Van Johnson, agreed. He goes, yeah, we could have been a little bit better.
He was the most conflicted character, Van Johnson's character.
Yeah.
I also think that whole sequence, which is a good sequence of Queeg looking this way and that and seeing guys throwing their helmets on and stuff, that also it shows sailors sticking together, look out for each other. Instead of looking out for the captain, and the officers, had a different responsibility. But I think that's part of the betrayal of Fred McMurray's character, is that he did not look out for his brother seaman, and
he was looking out for himself.
Like they were looking after each other on the ship, but they were just kind of fucking around with the captain too. And when it was really serious, Fred McMurray really left them down. And the lines that are directed against him for what he did, and even the getting the drink poured on him, nothing to me was as powerful as all of them filing out in silence.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we are done now. We don't. There's literally nothing left. And Fred McMurray plays that scene.
Right.
I mean, it's very moving. There's a lot of really kind of subtle acting, which you wouldn't necessarily expect in a movie from this era. And it was good. The romance stuff made it super slow for me, especially at the beginning.
Yeah,
and it was slower than I remembered, but it was fun to go back.
Well,
to.
all the music, all the anthems or whatever they were playing, like every time they went on a ship, especially that scene. I know that why they showed that scene on the aircraft carriers, because they want to show how good the Navy was. All those guys running, those shots were pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But when every time they cut away to the romance, it's like, oh, just get back to the courtroom. That's what I want to see. I want to see what's going on.
God.
And I don't know why he felt he had to do that. I read something where like the studio was trying to get the movie shorter, and he wouldn't make it shorter. And if he had cut he could have cut 20 minutes out without even.
He wanted it to be another half hour. But Cohen, the producer, the studio head, wanted it at 2 hours to get an extra showing in every day. That's why he did it. Yeah. But he said he the script they had to cut out 50 pages from the script.
Wow.
And to your point, if they just cut out the romance stuff and put the other stuff in, it would have been much more compelling. So yeah, that was definitely the weakest part of the film.
Yeah, well, to me, I've seen this film many times and I always enjoy it. But to me, it doesn't rise to the level of the classic for the reason everyone seems to be discussing. It's like, I was really going to go with a lot of jokes about the Ensign Keith in this, but I didn't realize till I looked him up that he had such a young, tragic death. He only made 4 movies, and he was being groomed as a star. And I was recently watching, Summer Place. I think that's Tab Hunter in it. Yeah, and I think he was showing like the same level of depth. You know what I mean? But it's one thing to be in the Summer Place, and another thing to be in, the Caine Mutiny with that level of stakes.
Well, but in the Navy stuff, and when he was on the ship, I thought he was good. Like his acting was good. It's when he's trying to do the romance with the woman, and she was overacting as well. I mean, and the mother.
But she could really sing.
Was that her singing?
I think so. I think she was a singer before she was an actress.
Yeah, but I don't know. Chris and Drew, Chris, you said you hadn't seen this before?
No, I hadn't. And, a lot of my comments will probably mirror a lot of things. I guess it's one of those things where I look at the romance part of it, and I once again, this is a movie for the 50s. If those two women aren't in there, the mother and the love interest, there's no female speaking parts. Not that that's a prerequisite or anything. As I've said before, my favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia. Only men speak in that movie.
Right.
But my point is that like it did feel really tacked on, but it almost felt tacked on simply because, hey, we got to throw in a romance here, or else, we're gonna lose the ladies, right? If we keep this in here, we sacrifice 20 minutes of screen time to this. They'll be pulled in by the innate drama of what's going on the ship and everything like that. I agree. Like, Jose Ferrer just, he just is like a huge bright spot. It was a little heartbreaking to see Fred McMurray be a jerk. That's not really his style. And the times that I've encountered him before, I don't see him that way. I did feel that the movie was a little slow. Generally, it was like, I felt like getting to the point where Queeg doesn't even show up for like 45 minutes.
Right.
And I understand
And it comes alive when he does.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I get it that they want to set the idea, they want to set the mood, they want to set all this stuff, but it really felt like it took a little while to get going. And the funny thing was, and maybe this is just my preconceived or what I'd known of the film, is that I was like, we get to the courtroom and I'm like, because now we have timers and you can, if you pause it, you see how much time is left.
Right.
I'm like, only about 20% of this movie even takes place in the courtroom.
Right.
It's really all of the lead up and then the courtroom, which, and maybe this is because I had always heard it was such a kind of this, big courtroom drama, or that was such an element of it. I felt a little flat, because what happened was Jose Ferrer, and while he's great in it, he doesn't really ask any questions, and he knows what he's going to do, and he regrets doing it. And that's kind of the crux. He knows he can get, once he gets Queeg on the stand, he's gonna push him till he cracks, and he feels bad about it. But for me, there just wasn't a whole lot of drama in that portion, believe it or not.
And did he really crack, or was it just him doing this? I mean,
no, he cracked.
He pushes him enough that like everybody on that tribunal saw what the first
when he got him to repeat,
officers were talking about.
I mean, that's a time-honored movie thing. Tom Cruise does that to Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. I mean, that's a kind of drama that I don't know that happens very often in real life, but it's very dramatic in the movies. And yeah, it was more dramatic than some of the other parts of the court scene. I agree with that.
One thing I want to say about the courtroom scene, and it's brought up a couple times by E.G. Marshall, is sort of like, when he's questioning people, he still has to use the respect of the Navy. He's a commanding, Queeg is higher ranking than Jose Ferrer, and he's due honor and respect. And the court, gives him the indulgence to question him hard, but it's like, you better be respectful or, you're going to pay a price for it. And what I also love about it, even though you don't know until the end exactly what Jose Ferrer was thinking, but you can tell he does have respect for him. You know what? I mean, the entire, it isn't just he's been warned and his career could suffer if if he's disrespectful to Queeg. You really get a sense that he, has respect for him and appreciates him. And, once again, I'm going to reiterate with John said, I love Humphry Bogart. And, I think this is a very good performance. And, I watch him reading the phone book, and I think he does a great job in this. And I was reading a review recently that said, this was his second to last substantial role. And I'm thinking, no way. He had what was Sabrina and We're No Angels and, The Harder You Fall. I mean, he had Desperate Hours, which was his return to gangsterism. He had a lot of great roles right up until the end, I know, in Harder They Fall. They had to bring in Rich Little to do his lines because the throat cancer had gotten to him. He started sounding like me, So, but I really liked the courtroom scene, and I thought Jose Ferrer. I thought they had a very good sparring there, as well.
Well, he also said, look, I don't think he's a coward. I don't think he could have done the things he did in the past if he was a coward. So there has to be another explanation. So it has to be this. And then at the end, he said, look, I did this. I was disgusted by it. No one else would do it because the wrong man was on trial, because he knew Merrick was innocent of this. And it was really Fred McMurray's character that was the author of the Caine Mutiny. And that's why he took the case, but he didn't want to do it. He did it for the reason because they were going to put the wrong man in jail. So I like the way they did that. Now, when I saw Eric Bogosian do it, and a lot more of the Nazi stuff came out in his diatribe at the end, it was much angrier, and it had much more impact than what Jose Ferrer did. Although I thought that was a great scene. You're
talking about what, 1950 compared to.
Well, that's what I mean. They couldn't do it. But
so was that more true to the book?
Yes. Okay. Yes. The other thing about the book and the play, Queeg is not the focal point of it. I think it's Kiefer who's the focal point of it, where obviously they padded the part with all the background stuff that they showed, which I liked. Instead of just explaining it in the courtroom, they showed you the typhoon. And by the way, the guy who was on the wheel was George Bailey's brother in It's a Wonderful Life. If just in case, just a little.
Wait a minute! I thought he was in the Army Air Force or Air Corps.
No, he was. Yeah, he was a flyer in It's a Wonderful Life. But yeah, so
but I mean, I will say this for the film, and I think it's kind of an interesting idea, and I wonder how this part of it was received back in '54. Is the idea that you could have a man who was brave and who was totally competent. That the idea that the stress could get to them, that the idea of, call it shell shock, we call it PTSD now, could get to somebody. And then the fact that even though in the end he's, I doubt they drummed him out of the service, but he obviously was relieved of command, probably. And he, finished out whatever he was doing, pushing papers or something. But the idea that at least it did at least deal with that kind of subject matter in a very sensitive way, as opposed to what a lot of films you saw in the 50s, which were just like very rah, we did, I mean, I remember I've seen so many war movies from that period of time where it's just kind of like this fodder. I mean, for no pun intended, that they just churned out, this like, every guy, in the squad is like, noble and lantern jawed and
it was propaganda.
Without fear.
It was propaganda. Let's call it.
But I mean, even after the war was over, that these things, they still churned out these kind of Saturday matinee war movies. So on the one hand, I'll give the movie a lot of credit for that, for like basically, not just saying, because it starts out and you're just like, okay, this guy's just a mess. And then later on, you kind of, they really do highlight the fact that he's a mess because of what he's been through, for the service that he has done has made him a mess. And through really kind of almost no fault of his own, just through, as he put it, there's that one line he talks about how some days it felt like the entire German submarine corps was after him.
Which is part of the paranoia.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but that's also why at the beginning of the film, the Navy had them put that little disclaimer that there's never been a mutiny in the U.S. Navy. They had to put that in there. That was not their choice. But it's based on a true story where there was a typhoon. It was the Halsey thing where 3 ships got capsized from being in a typhoon. And I think the commander's name was Hull. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, since you read the book, but in the book, they end up overturning the court-martial of Queeg.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I literally
the ending is very different.
Years, so I'm not sure, but
yeah,
it's all very dramatic. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Chris, because looking at Queeg through our modern eyes, I think you would extend him more sympathy than you would expect the movie to. And I think, like, I watch it and I go, well, he needed to be removed because he was endangering the ship.
Right.
But it's not because he's a coward.
Right.
I mean, this is the era where, General Patton would smack you in the face,
right,
because you're being a coward and, snap out of it, that kind of stuff. And the movie let it be part of the story that maybe this guy is not okay.
Right.
Because of what he's experienced, which is different than, well, he was in war and he gets scared now.
Right.
Because I don't see him, even in the performance, I don't see him as afraid, I see him as freezing. And people are asking him to do his job, which I mean, I don't know. I've never commanded a ship, but I'd imagine there's a fair amount of pressure in that responsibility. And he wasn't able to do it. Presumably he was previously, and when he served in the war and everything, but that part of him is gone. So like that, I think that's why the movie is more heartbreaking than you might expect, because they've done a couple remakes. There is another version of this story that I also haven't watched since it was out and about that era, but this makes me want to go back and watch it again, which has a much clearer villain, which is Crimson Tide.
Oh yeah,
I was just looking at it.
Yeah, I mean it's a mutiny on a nuclear submarine. So the stakes, I mean, it's a newer movie, of course. The stakes are literally the world is in the balance, starting a nuclear war, all that kind of stuff. And it's another one of these, I mean, it's stacked acting wise. I think that was one of the first times I noticed Viggo Mortensen. They just call him Weps the whole movie because he's weapons. But there's just that could be a play too. I think George Zunza and all these other people are in it along with Denzel. And I mean, every time I think Gene Hackman in my head, I think the incomparable Gene Hackman, because like no one else could do what he did in movies, which was like Bogart. I mean, Bogart was so distinct. So I think the idea that you cast that kind of actor in these roles, or cast Nicholson as Jeffers or whatever his name was, the colonel in A Few Good Men, that makes the movie orbit around them before you even see it, which I think is interesting, because then you end up inverting some of what you expect. But I don't know. I think the movie was more progressive than I expected as far as essentially mental illness.
Stanley Kramer.
I don't know, progressive, because they set up all these scenes, like especially the strawberry scene, where
with geometric logic,
he accuses them.
But that's because he's not well.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So they're showing us, and he almost capsized the ship. So they're showing us all this stuff as an audience. We're kind of rooting for Fred McMurray at that point. Fred McMurray's right. He's right. This guy is crazy, and we got to get him out of here. And by the end, you're completely on the lawyer's side. You agree with the lawyer as much as you disagree with just his attitude. When he came in, he said, "I don't want to do this, but I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to take it."
I'd rather be prosecuting this.
That's
case.
right. And
I don't think Fred McMurray. I don't think, because Van Johnson, when Fred McMurray started talking, remember Van Johnson? I don't want to hear that kind of talk.
Right.
I don't want to hear that. Right. But Fred McMurray kept pushing him and pushing him and pushing him till he finally said yes. And
if you remember in the courtroom, they established that Van Johnson only had a high school education.
Well, they were trying.
I think.
Right. He wasn't smart enough to diagnose.
Well, because you kind of see how Fred McMurray could get in there and turn him the way he did.
Right.
But again, Van Johnson wasn't wrong. I mean, he almost capsized that ship.
Well, the question was, would the ship have gone down if he didn't take the action he took? And he says, I believe it would have. So he believed he was saving everybody on that boat.
Van Johnson. That's right.
Yes.
So they weren't wrong.
Probably did.
Well, I agree with that.
So that's what I mean. So that's what's a little confusing about the end of the film, because Van Johnson did the right thing.
But Jose Ferrer explained that. He goes, the only reason why he took the case was because the wrong man, they were going after the wrong man. And Merrick felt like what he did saved the ship, but he didn't like going after Queeg because in his head, this was the greatest generation that saved us from the Nazis. That's what you find out later on. It didn't really come out in that.
But also,
scene.
I mean, Jose Ferrer's whole approach. I mean, he's a lawyer. You think of him obviously as a lawyer before he's a sailor.
Right.
I guess he's a JAG lawyer or whatever that was the equivalent back then. But he's also clearly a man of principle, and he believes everybody, as this is what I think is the way the system is designed and should run. Everybody deserves an advocate.
Right.
You were talking about what movie are you going to bring to the show. I narrowed it down to 2 movies, which one I would want to bring when if my name comes up on the wheel. And the one I'm not going to bring actually deals with a lot of this. It's called 22 July. It's Paul Greengrass's movie about that massacre in Norway where that guy murdered 70 children at a summer camp for the left-wing political party because he hated them and he was a Nazi, but he wanted to be in court and have a platform to say all the things that he had to say about the country and this hate and all these other things. But a big part of that story is he actually reaches out to a famous lawyer who is not aligned with him politically and says, I want you to represent me. And the guy has to wrestle with, I mean, of course I don't support this man, and he is a mass murderer, and there's no question that he did it, but he deserves an advocate. And Jose Ferrer plays that out.
I understand that
different stages, and it's very
they
powerful.
have to. That's. I mean, any movie like
Well,
this,
no, he didn't have
he
to.
He doesn't have to. Somebody else might do it.
Because everyone else turned him down.
Right.
Well,
But somebody else might take the responsibility, but you know what? Jose Ferrer, I'm going to take the responsibility.
Right. I guess my point is they had to. I mean, Fred McMurray. If Fred McMurray had gone up there and told the truth, what would have happened in that trial? Because he got up there and he lied. He said, "What was his lie? His lie was, I didn't."
I was astonished.
At what? That they thought he was
That
crazy.
Merrick. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
That's the line. Yeah.
So he turned on his friend basically. But what if he hadn't lied? What would have happened in that trial?
I think he would still torpedoed Queeg, but I think
Well, I mean, they questioned the education of Van Johnson, so they would have questioned Fred McMurray's education, who diagnosed this based on what he saw. So I don't know if it would have gone any different.
So either way, Queeg was going to get.
Yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think the reason Fred McMurray did what he did was because he was afraid that if it went the other way and he told the truth, then he would be the next guy on the chopping block.
Right. His career would be over.
You know? Right. Because he was the one that put the idea. He started the whole paranoia talk.
That's right.
He was the one that did that. So and at one point, that great line where Jose Ferrer is like, there's a possibility you're going to all hang. Basically, he's like, you could very well hang for this. That's not beyond the realm of what could happen here. So I think that's why Fred McMurray ends up telling that lie, because he doesn't want to be, if things go bad.
Well, he's a coward.
He doesn't want to be.
He's the coward.
Doesn't want to be on. Yeah, he doesn't want to be on the hook.
And I like Ferrer's attitude. When Merrick's like he's lying, he goes, I want one hero, not two mutineers.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Queeg.
Because it does take away. It does. If you look at it, Merrick, Van Johnson, it would have been bad if Fred McMurray told the truth. This is where I disagree, because it would just mean he'd been manipulated. That Van Johnson had been manipulated. He wasn't heroic. He was, he was a pawn. Now he's a guy that, took action essentially on his own. It very much was. He was if you want him off, he's a hero. If you believe the ship would have sunk, he's a hero. And I think what played well for the character is he was willing to tell the truth. Right. When he was on the stand, he was honest, and I think the sincerity came through.
Who are we talking about? Van Johnson?
Van Johnson, when he was on there.
Because ultimately, the Bogart part of this is just watching his breakdown, watching him realize that, yes, I have a problem. That's the power of his scenes.
Right.
We know he was wrong. He was gonna sink that ship. And
that
scene with the scene with the strawberries, and they brought up the old thing that happened back before with the key or something. There's something about a key. So, I mean, I think the power of Bogart was to watch a man break down.
But he also made you feel
and they all felt
sympathetic to him.
Right. Well, Eli Wallach and the whole crew. Yes, I understand.
When he's looking around at the end, when he realizes he went on that rant and they're all staring at him.
Yeah.
And he goes, but I can't remember everything. You felt bad for him. You really did.
But doesn't he walk out? He
wasn't on trial, but it didn't feel like that.
Right.
So.
Right. Who wasn't on trial?
Bogart.
He was not on trial?
Well, no, Merrick was on trial.
Merrick was on trial for
his mutiny.
Right.
But he was able to essentially put the reason for the mutiny at the center of the trial, which makes sense as a defense. And so you end up with Queeg on the stand feeling like he's defending himself, which he is, and he can't, because he didn't do anything wrong, like with malice. He just isn't okay.
Right. And the way he was buttering that little piece of bread.
Yeah. The little tiny pieces. Yeah. Some commander complained about that. Some commander complained about that and said no one would ever do that, and said it to Bogart. Yeah. So then Bogart started making the pieces even smaller on the next scene, and the guy never said anything again.
Yeah. I kind of felt like I was flip flopping, because I did feel like the crew was was purposely gaslighting him, especially during that scene when the guys were putting on suits and the hats, the helmets while the thing was going on. But, ultimately at the end when he's sinking that ship, it's like,
well, that's the question, right? That's what it comes down to. Would the ship have sunk?
It definitely would.
Mutiny.
I mean, that little toy that they had, that model definitely looked like it was going to flop over.
That model is in Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
It was?
Yeah. He drives by it on the bike.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
That is funny.
All right.
But
well,
in-camera effects.
That's right.
Camera. Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty means you didn't like it. Not guilty as you liked it.
Guilty, you didn't like it. Right. Not guilty. Right. Yeah.
Well, not guilty for me. I'm the one who picked it.
Yeah.
Not guilty.
Yeah, not guilty for sure.
I'm going to go not guilty.
Yeah. I say not guilty as well.
Oh,
although,
wow.
and the other thing is, I'm happy that the couple got together at the end. That was,
that was really satisfying, wasn't it?
I wish you could just cut that piece out. I wish they had more of the trial. I think it would have been much more compelling. But for the time, and hey, you can't argue. It was the second highest grossing film of that year. You can't argue with it.
And Jose Ferrer with the broken wing still acting is hard.
2 weeks prior to he broke it. Yeah,
it's just he was great. I couldn't get over him.
He's a fantastic actor and director.
So is his kid, who's now dead.
He was amazing in Dune.
He was. That should
Yeah, that's the first thing I saw him in as a kid.
Yeah, me too.
What about Cyrano? Did you guys see him in Cyrano?
Later as an adult, sure.
He was fantastic. Yeah. Great actor.
All right, so let's spin for next one.
What do we call this wheel? The Wheel of Justice?
This is the Wheel of Justice turns slowly. And then there were 3.
I'm so excited about this. I can't believe this. Look at the strawberries. Look at them.
Strawberry sand. Pour out the sand.
John.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Quiet on set.
Okay.
Nice.
Hey,
and now that I'm
like the 1842 election.
There you go. Now that I'm actually living in Baltimore practically, I would like to bring, and we mentioned it earlier, And Justice for All, starring Al Pacino.
You know what? I've never seen it.
You haven't?
Oh, God.
Okay.
You're out of order. You're out of order. This whole court's out of order.
There's lots of courtroom drama.
I've seen clips from it, but I've never seen the whole movie.
Great. So I hope you enjoy it, because as much as I do, I love it. It's one of my favorite films, 70s films. Hank from what's his name? Hank from the Larry Sanders Show. Jeffrey Tambor's in there. John Forsythe plays a great judge. I mean, it's a lot of great characters.
Yeah, the
Al Pacino's
judge.
Just out of his mind.
Yeah.
And this was the run, I think, right around The Godfather. This is pretty early. This is pretty Serpico.
This was after. Yeah, this was 74.
It's after that, but still,
it was starting to get to the big Al Pacino.
Yeah, it's getting to the overacting Al thing. So anyway,
but I love that too. I'll watch Al Pacino in anything.
So In Justice
he
for
hardly
All.
yells. That was 79.
Really?
Yeah. Jack Warden too plays a suicidal.
Jack Warden is great, and he looks like he's 80 years old in this film.
I'm going to pick a Jack Warden film too.
Right. I don't know how close it was to that film you're talking about, Sean, but it's pretty close. So, All right. So In Justice for All. All right. So that's next week. All right. For now, let's do a little round of what you watch. Let's start with Chris.
Well, I actually finished the season 2 of Dark Winds on AMC. That's the second season of their adaptation series of Tony Hillerman's Jim Chi and Joe Leaporn novels. This season was not as good as the first season, but it's still really good. They really pumped up the action in this season, while the first season was really like setting the idea, getting the vibe, and really kind of a mystery. This one was almost more of like a thriller, right? There's a mystery there, but not much of one. And there's like a kind of a, like a super criminal dude, and it's all about them like chase. It feels like literally half the series is a chase after this guy, and but it's really well done. It's really exciting. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. It's Dark Winds season 2. Check it out.
All right.
It's a TV that is worth watching.
Cool, Sean.
Well, I started watching, I'm 3 episodes into, on Apple Plus Silo. I don't know if anyone saw it.
Oh, I do want to see that.
Well, to me, it kind of starts well, but once you kind of know what it's about, it's like, how are they going to stretch this out to a whole season? It seems to me it should be the situation, things should be easier to solve and deal with. It's not that I don't like it or anything, but it's sort of like so many things, like documentary series, it's like 5 parts. And then when you're done, you're saying, this could have been 3 parts or 2 parts, and it would have been a whole lot stronger. To me, the silo sounds like a good idea for a feature that's probably going to end up being overly long. But that said,
is that Rebecca Ferguson?
It.
Rebecca Ferguson in that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've been watching.
Oh, Drew, after that groan you just made, or that?
Oof, Rebecca Ferguson.
Moan. That was a moan, not a groan.
Fantastic.
She's great.
I love her.
Yeah.
So I watched a documentary. It was only 1 part, so that was nice. Usually in a true crime documentary, it's built around a crime. But what I watched is built around something that shockingly is not a crime, yet was incredibly damaging and awful. It's called BS High, and it's about this guy who invented a school to invent a football program for high school kids. So it's not illegal to make up a school and to make promises to kids about getting into college and going to the NFL and using them for your own ends. And he is the center of it. He's interviewed. He's surprisingly honest for a horrific con man. It's very upsetting.
I don't understand. I don't understand. He created
he wanted to have a great high school football team. So he invented twice actually a program. And that was a football team, but there's no school.
Oh, he had a football team, but no school?
Yeah. And so it's not illegal to invent a school that doesn't exist and invite people to come. And, he didn't there's ways he could have done things that you would say, well, that's an illegal fraud, but he managed to work around that. I mean, he's so insane. And thinks he's more exciting than he is. But you can see how he's dangling these dreams in front of these kids and these families that are irresistible. And so it's really great. And then after watching something of that quality, we've, as I've mentioned before, we've been on a Rob Lowe kick in the house. And so we went back and we watched the movie that Rob Lowe and everyone involved in the movie were absolutely sure was going to be the big movie for the Oscars that year. Unfortunately, it was not good. And it opened the same weekend as Splash, so it got buried. But I watched Hotel New Hampshire, the John Irving adaptation starring Jodie Foster and Matthew Modine and Nastasia Kinski and Beau Bridges and many other people. And it is Wallace Shawn. It is not good. It's not legendarily awful bad like some of the movies that you might watch for fun, but it is quite shocking that it was made the way it was made, and that they really thought it had the prospects that it had.
I remember the hype for that one too. Back in those days, that was a lot of hype for that.
I'm sure, yeah. And I mean, between
I
John
saw
Irving and
it,
that cast,
and literally, I don't remember anything.
I just remember a bear suit or something. There's something with a bear.
Well,
suit
that's the poster. One of the 2 big posters was of a teddy bear, and Rob Lowe was upset about that because he said that people thought they were going to see Garfield or something, and this is a movie with gang rape and incest and terrorism.
Yeah, the marketing on that thing was really strange.
Yeah, really, really awful. Yeah. And but I mean, it's very John Irving. It doesn't not give you the tone, but it's one of these movies. It's both overstuffed and doesn't hold together. So I'm glad that I finally saw it, but it wasn't good.
Did he also write The Word According to Garp? Is that the same author?
Yeah, that's another John Irving one. Cider House Rules.
That was another film I didn't like. I didn't like Garp either.
Yeah, I didn't care for Garp either. I like the books better.
Okay. John?
So I went to the movies this weekend. I saw 2 movies in the theater. Saturday, I went to a matinee and saw Jawan, starring Shah Rukh Khan. You guys probably don't know who that is, this audience anyway. But Friday night, I saw Equalizer 3 with Denzel Washington. Look, Denzel, you already said this, Sean, but Denzel Washington could read a phone book, and I'm going to enjoy it because I just.
What's a phone book?
He's incredible. He's absolutely incredible. This was the worst of the 3. I still enjoyed it. I think it was very violent, like more violent than the other 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, really bloody. But a lot of it was in the dark. And the other thing is, my only issue with this one especially he's become like this, almost like Superman. Like he takes on 6 people and no one lays a glove on him, and he just wipes people out. So there's no stakes when he's fighting. That's my only complaint about the film. But the action scenes were good. It was set in Italy, Naples, and Rome. Absolutely beautiful stuff I've never seen before. Just spectacular setting. And I think it's the last one. They said it's going to be a trilogy. It was a good ending for the character, but I think especially the first one. The first one is a much, much better film based on the TV show, The Equalizer. But it was a nice send off for him, and check it out if you get a chance. He's always great in anything. So
yeah, he is. And I love the first one.
I like the first 2 a lot.
And the 2, I like the second one too. All right, I'm going to talk about a doc. Well, first of all, I'm totally immersed in Brian De Palma, Laura. I don't know what's going on with me.
What's wrong with you?
So I just finished watching. I'm in the middle of watching his documentary about him. He didn't direct it. It was Neil Baumbach.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's
De Palma, which is just fantastic. And I have such a love for him right now in his cinema, and I just can't get enough. Anyway, but there's a documentary on Netflix. Chris, I don't think you're going to appreciate this. It's a one-off documentary called Scouts Honor: The Secret Files of the Boy Scouts of America.
Oh, boy.
And if you've seen Spotlight, you know what this documentary is about.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, and it's a brutal.
Wait a minute.
It's a brutal takedown of the Boy Scouts, and it's an honest takedown, I think. Chris, I think your kid's in Scouts and you're in Scouts, right? Still.
Yeah.
I only got through weed left.
This movie. I don't know if you have you seen it. Probably not. I guess
I haven't. I haven't, and I'll be quite honest. Part of my own personal involvement in Scouts is to make sure to keep an eye on things.
That's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering about that because there's a lot of parents I know who do it. I think probably for that reason. I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, and don't get me wrong, that the Scouts BSA has had to do a lot to correct the problems that have happened.
Yeah.
And it's a constant vigil.
I bet.
And it's a constant vigil.
Well, it's amazing.
Yeah, you got to constantly move around these scout leaders.
Well,
listen.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's
the main guy in the documentary that they focus on was a guy who was in charge of the security, and he was an advocate for, to protect children, and it's just brutal. I mean, if you've seen Spotlight, you know what I'm talking about. It's amazing how pervasive it was, and how they got away with everything, and actually, their standards were very lax about how somebody would come in and say, I want to be a scout leader. You talk about building a football team out of nothing. These guys would build whole scout troops just to abuse them. And it's insanity. So anyway, it's a pretty powerful doc. It's a one-off, and it's frustrating and pretty scary. But
sure.
Anyway, so yeah, that's how I ended my week with that one. So
it's uplifting.
Very uplifting.
Yeah. Super fun.
Yeah.
So one other little note, and this is really strange how I got here, so I'm just going to get them in. You know how oftentimes we'll talk about people who have passed on?
Yeah.
You know how sometimes you read something and you go, that guy's dead, and then you find out he's still alive?
Yeah, that happens.
Joe Esterhaus is still alive. I don't know.
Is he really?
Yeah, I thought he was dead, and
I thought he was writing Maccabees for
his career's dead, right?
Well, I
get him confused with Don Simpson all the time. Don Simpson and Buckheimer, right?
Bruckheimer.
Yeah. So Estevez is still alive?
No.
Esterhaus.
He was the screenwriter that was getting just absolutely
Showgirls.
Showgirls.
Yeah.
Forget that. He told the same plot 4 times.
Jagged Edge.
The Music Box.
So what is the
one with Sharon Stone?
Yeah.
And the one with the Nazi guy.
So how did you find out he was still alive?
Well, I ran into it. I was listening to a podcast. I don't listen to it all the time, but if you've ever heard Katrina Longworth's You Must Remember This, it's pretty good about the history of Hollywood. Yeah. And so I ended up running. I was just looking. I hadn't listened to it in a while, and I saw this one, and it was about Jade and Showgirls, right? Nice. And I had seen Jade in the theater.
William Friedkin's Jade. That's William Friedkin.
William Friedkin. Right. Yeah, that's part of it too.
Right. And what's her name? Linda.
Wasn't David Caruso in that?
That was one of Robert.
You talk about moaning. I'll give you a moan for her.
Yeah. Yes, but it was just this weird thing, and so like naturally they're talking about Joe Esterhaus and all this money. He was one time paid like $2.5 million for a 4-page treatment that never ended up getting made, like crazy stuff. And it was just one of those things. And I looked him up on IMDb, and there was no date of death. I was just like, is this guy still alive? Apparently, he moved to Ohio and found Jesus or something. So.
Oh, I heard that.
Good for him.
That's probably why he was working on Maccabees with Mel Gibson.
Oh yeah, I actually considered bringing Music Box as a courtroom movie. It's a crazy movie. It's Costa Gavras directing a Joe Esterhaus strip with Jessica Lange and
I like that
secret
film.
Nazis, and
I like
it's a
that
good
film.
movie.
Yeah.
It's all the same film. It's sort of like a seemingly good guy accused of an evil crime, and then at the end of Act 2, and then the Act 2, they proved that the person was innocent, and then that person's defender discovers in Act 3 that they were really guilty the whole time.
Right.
I saw that. Jeff Bridges and Glenn Close.
Yeah.
I saw that movie.
Yeah. Jagged Edge.
Yeah, the Music Box has
Also
less
written by
vagina.
Joe Esterhaus.
There you go. We should do a Joe Esterhaus. Never mind.
Retrospect.
No.
Round Robin.
Wait till he dies.
Everyone would bring showgirls.
If we do though, then I'm going to do.
I have that on Laserdisc.
Lives existed called Hearts of Fire, starring one Bob Dylan.
Oh, that's a classic.
That was written by Esterhaus?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it was one of those ones where it was like, oh, it stars this, hot new young singer, Fiona, which I never heard of, So it was one of those things where you're like, yeah, I guess that didn't work out either. Anyway, it's just this weird thing. I was pretty, like, if you had said to me, I bet you $20 he's alive, I'll take that bet.
That happened to somebody in town that owned a post facility. I thought died years ago. He's still alive. I feel terrible, but yeah.
I didn't know they made the Showgirls too.
Yes.
There's a Showgirls too?
Yeah.
And he's from heaven or something?
That's exactly what it's called.
Oh.
What,
It
are you
actually
for real? They made a sequel to Showgirls? No.
Yeah, it's Glenn Plummer has a new girlfriend in the movie after he splits up from Elizabeth Berkley, and that actress made the movie. She wrote it and produced it and starred in it as that character, as a sequel to Showgirls. Surprisingly, Paul Verhoeven not involved, and I haven't seen that, so I don't know if it's if that's a good choice or not. But
is there any courtroom drama in
movie.
it? Is there a courtroom in there at all?
I don't know.
Is there any swimming pool sex?
Hearts of Fire. You forgot to mention Hearts of Fire, which incidentally has a 4.4.
That's
on
one of the
Internet
best
Movie
love
Database.
scenes I've ever seen.
Was directed by Richard Marquand. So he
Who
gave us
directed
Jedi
or
Return
Empire?
of the Jedi and
Return
the
of
Joe
the Jedi
Esterhaus
thing.
film. That's a range.
All right.
Yeah, it really is.
All right, Queeg. Get us out of this one.
Listen, all I can say is after this kind of content, if this doesn't get you subscribed, nothing will, okay? Subscribe, hit the notification button, smash that like button, and share this. Because we're getting about 85 to 100 hits. There's more people who want to hear this fantastic content, so share it up there.
I don't get it.
Well, you're playing with your balls, so that should bring in some.
Yeah, that's at
some
least 4
views.
people.
Whatever.
So.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it works.
Whatever.
All right,
do whatever.
everybody.
For the
next
show,
week,
for the channel.
Next week, and Justice for All.
You're out of order. This court's out of order.
Was that Pacino?
I think so.
Hoo-ha.
Yeah.
Come on, Ralph. Do your impressions. They're
I
so
don't
good.
have any.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Do Humphrey
right.
Bogart. Right now, do Humphrey Bogart.
Here's looking at you, kid. How's that?
Okay, that's not bad. Sounds like his cousin, but that's
Whatever.
good.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.